Hello class, this is Alec Rogers. Today we will be going over the Rhythm Strip crash course. This is the first lesson in the course once you are up here in Mounds View, Minnesota. Welcome. We are going to go over three things today. We are going to do a brief Rhythm Strip basics, which is going to go over QRS, bradycardia, tachycardia, everything you need to know about rhythm strips and a pacemaker. Then we're going to quickly go over basic common pacing modes and how that pertains to today's lesson, and moving on forward looking at rhythm strips in this course and your future here in Medtronic. Then we're going to go into two different groups and we're going to see what activities we have there. So let's get started. This is the rhythm strip basic. We are going to learn about QRS, bradycardia, and tachycardia. The QRS, which is shown right here, is the basic rhythm strip. You will hear QRS all the time. However, as a Medtronic clinical specialist or sales rep, you will be looking for three things to decide if this is important for a pacemaker or not. In the QRS, we're looking at, so we'll look at this second complex here. We're looking at the P wave, which is this little mound right here, the R wave, which is right here, and the T wave, which is following. T waves are usually bigger, taller than P waves. Even though they look very similar, they are different. So what a P wave is your atrial heart rate. So what is the top chamber doing? This is your bottom chamber, and what we really care about. Atrial is very important in diagnostics, and your T wave, a little bit sharper and taller than the P wave, this is your ventricular depolarization. This has to happen for another QRS to happen. So another R wave to happen, you have to have a ventricular depolarization, which we refer to as the T wave. The importance about the T wave in this course is without a T wave here, you cannot have any more QRSs. So you need the T wave. If you see nothing but P waves coming by, well, that is something we'll go over in a little bit, and you will see in one of our questions. Bradycardia in this course is simple. Any resting heart rate lower than 60. This is basically the reason we get a pacemaker. We're going to go over different diagnosis, but bradycardia is for a pacemaker. Slow heart rate, we keep it up with the pacemaker. Tachycardia, which is important in this lesson, but we're going to go over in much more detail in high power with our tachy devices. It is any heart rate over 100 beats per minute. There can be sinus tach, which is regular, exercise, ventricular fibrillation, atrial fibrillation, all of these things we'll go over. Really today we're looking at atrial fibrillation with those. This is the common modes of pacing. So you're going to see a big list of advantages and disadvantages. I will not go over all of them in class today. However, you will have this slide up while you are doing one of your activities. It won't be a bad idea to look at it. I would read through all of these. But we're going to talk about AAI, VVI, and DDD. So as we know, AAI means the first one is the first chamber. The first A is the chamber paced, which is the atrium, the right atrium in this category. The second A is what chamber are we sensing? Only in the atrium. And I is inhibiting. We won't really go into that today. AAI is technically a common mode in Europe, but in the States and pretty much everywhere outside of Europe, AAI is not common. It only paces the right atrium. We won't go into as much detail right now on that because it's really not as prudent, but you will have a question on it and why it is important. VVI. This is a common mode that we used to use in all of our pacemakers before we developed dual chamber pacemakers, but now we use it with a chronic atrial fibrillation. Patient that is never going to need an atrial lead, they don't need it. They don't need the second piece of hardware in there. Less hardware means more in the body, or less in the body, better for the body. And it is a single lead into the right ventricle. That is very important because later when we go into low power heart failure devices, we will put in a left ventricular lead. But in this lesson, we are only dealing with the right ventricle. Your DDD, you will see this 10 to 20 times a day. Most common mode there is. This means we are pacing in both the atrium and the ventricle. We are sensing in both the atrium and the ventricle. And the last D basically means we are tracking. So when patient is at 70, we're not pacing and the lower rate set at 60, we're pacing what the atrium's doing at 70. All of these are very common and important. We need to know that basically atrial fibrillation, great mode for this. Anything that does not have atrial fibrillation, great mode for this. And there will be one here, patient with normal and contact conduction, but you'll go over that in one of the later lessons. Do not focus on AAI today. Next, we are going to break up into two different groups. As you can see next to me, we have my 6 lovely volunteers. Thank you to my education staff. We are going to be going over, you're going to be doing a role-playing scenario. In this scenario, you, the student, is going to be the sales rep. You will be talking to one of the instructors here who will be playing the doctor. You will need to discuss 3 things. What type of device this patient needs? Do they need a pacemaker? Do they need a defibrillator? Remember, this is a pacemaker class, so we're going into, is it a pacemaker or not? How many leads does this patient need? And what are the appropriate settings for this device? Settings, don't go too crazy. I know you guys know more than we are putting in here today. Have fun with it, but the main important thing is what mode of pacing. That is what I want to know. That is what they want to know, but then we will talk about more potential options because there's a lot of potential from there. You can see there is marker strips. They will help you. However, marker strips can be misleading. So if you do not know how to read them, just pretend that those aren't there. So half of the class will be breaking up into the role-playing scenario first. There's 14 of you. So there are 7 that will go in here first, and the second 7 we'll be doing our scavenger hunt question. As you guys have already done this lesson, we are doing a new take on it. I would like you to, using the resources provided, find a rhythm strip for each diagnosis and attach it to the worksheet. 6 sinus syndrome, 70% of all pacemakers are put in because of this. Know it, breathe it, live it. I want you to see this in your sleep. When you see an EKG of a 6 sinus syndrome patient, say, perfect, let's put a pacemaker in them. Complete heart block. This is the easy one. You see this and it's obvious to anyone who doesn't know what a pacemaker is. They need a pacemaker. The third one, this one is a little bit more challenging. It is atrial fibrillation with subsequent pauses. Remember, atrial fibrillation is a fast heart rate. Subsequent pauses are also important, but why does this patient get a device? Trick question, it's really not because of the subsequent pauses, but they add to the diagnosis. So on this one, make sure you put a rhythm strip as well as answer why they get a device. It will be in all of your resources, and our resources are right here. Again, we have Medtronic Academy, HRS Online, and ATI School. All 3 of these are great. I would suggest you use one from each. Going back to the scavenger hunt question, you will probably finish before the time is done. I would suggest go back and do 1, 2, 3 for each one. The more you have, the better views you will have, and we will use these in our next lesson. So it's beneficial to use more. Once we are done, we will submit all these, and then we will be taking a 10-question time test after we have done, everyone has completed the role-playing scenario. We've switched, and then everyone's completed the scavenger hunt question. So once you are done with all these, we will be doing a 10-question time test. If you have any questions, please let me or my coworkers know here, and let's get started. Thank you for your time.